Well, hello and welcome everybody. Somebody please post in chat that you can hear me all right. Sorry for the late start, but it's been a madhouse here, to say the least. So as soon as someone gives me the thumbs up that you can hear me, we will get rolling. All right. So, welcome everybody to a very special. Oops, hold on. Make sure the camera's on the right setting here. That's why it's there. Okay, should work. Sorry guys, I'm trying to get one of my cameras up and running. It will just be one more second. Bear with me. Yep, you'll see it'll change here in a second. Why are you not working? Hold on one second, gang. All right. So, everybody can hear me though now, right? Correct? I'm just trying to troubleshoot a camera issue here, which should not be an issue because I use it all the time. Oh my goodness. One more second, gang. Oh, that's why. Hold on, I need to change the camera battery real quick. That was the issue. One second here. I'm just gonna find the camera bag. Go. One more second. We're ready to rock and roll. All right. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to what is a very special anniversary in my family's life, in the life of everything I am and everything that I do, everything that I hold sacred, and all due to a choice made by, as he put it in a quotation to my mother, an unemployed woodcutter made a choice that changed the world forever. All right, so can everybody see me now and hear me? Everything? I just want to make sure. So yes, I'm being seen and heard. Awesome. Okay. Cool. All right. So yeah, welcome. This was a tough one for me because my father has always been a guiding force in my life, even after taking his final walk. And I am perpetually in awe of the lessons. The lessons. When I was a kid and my father would try and teach me something or tell me something, and he often, referenced things being like the layer of an onion, or everything being like an onion. It's layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. And the problem with most people is most people are satisfied with the surface level of that onion. They don't want to get past the brown outer skin and dig deeper and find out what that plant, that tree, that animal, that person, that track, what mysteries, what questions, what answers it holds. So I cannot help but to be so grateful for my father for instilling that knowledge in me, or I shouldn't say instilling the knowledge in me, but making it so that consciously, subconsciously, without thought, I wake up every morning and I choose to look upon that day as the first day of the rest of my life. It's one of my new mantras. It's the first thing out of my mouth after I do my breath work and meditation and all that good stuff. And I try to approach every day as if it's my first. That way, no matter what you do, no matter how mundane the task you might have to do may seem, there's magic to be had there. There's magic to be seen there. There's so much. There's so much. Everything is so nuanced and has so many details and patterns and layers upon layers upon layers. And only when you've spent a lot of time in the woods, like my father did and like I have, and those of you out there watching who are also nature educators, you reach this point where you're in the wilderness and you just know where something is. Be it a deer or a rabbit or, some animal sign. You just know, because eventually you spend enough time outside, the earth gives us gifts, because it realizes that we are trying to attempt to kind of go back to our hunter-gatherer roots, where we were much more closely intertwined with Earth Mother and all the trillions upon trillions of beings that dwell upon her. I often, with my students too, to illustrate this point, and it was really easy to do when I lived in the Pacific Northwest. There's these beautiful stumps, unfortunately from back in the day when they just clear cut everything. But there's these ancient old, red cedar stumps or hemlock stumps. And you can have two stumps that are 20 feet apart, yet when you look at them through the eye of the tracker, when you approach them from the place of the sacred question, you realize that these two stumps, even though they're in proximity to each other, they may have completely different species of moss growing on them. They may have completely different, critters, insects around them. And then it really makes you think about, is there anything in this world, that we would consider to be alive, that is just a singular being? We like to think of ourselves as individuals, right? As individual people. When in fact, we are a meat suit with a nice, meat computer up here and some bendable thumbs. And then we have trillions of other organisms throughout our body. We have, I've said this before, we have mites in our eyebrows that help clean the base of our eyebrows. We have countless flora in our gut to help us digest our food. We have bacteria and things on our skin that help to, act as a first layer of immunity. There's no such thing as a true, just singular being. Even down to the smallest single-celled organisms in our body. And that's why I often encourage people, if you have access to a microscope, I know my buddy Jim, if he's watching, he'll probably sell you one at a good price. But, go out and get some water from a pond and put it on a slide and just look in there. Just one or two little drops of water. And if you have the right type of microscope, you see this myriad of life forms that are alien in appearance. They've got many legs, some just kind of like lumber themselves around that droplet of water. And it just, when you get to somebody who's been, 47 years now, I have been immersed in the world of nature education and the skills that all of our ancestors used to live close to the earth. And I'm finding more now than I ever did, especially after what I've just come through. And it's no stranger. I'm not gonna rehash too much, but it's been a rough couple years for me, and it really didn't need to be. Because if people had truly listened to my father, they may have understood what he was actually trying to say all those many times and many classes. I'm going to say a few things tonight that might dip into territory I wouldn't normally go into. And I'm not doing it in a bad way, but it's just some simple truths that I need to let people know about what it's been like to be T3. Now, I always knew that when my father took his final walk, that there would be some upheaval of some sort, To the level that it's happened, absolutely not. Absolutely not. To the point where, for the 10 years I was teaching there and the 16 plus years I've been teaching elsewhere, as soon as my father took his final walk, what was and still is a one, and keep in mind that I'm speaking about 1% of the overall global, and what I call my global tracker chosen family. I know that 99+% of you are some of the most amazing people and good friends and wish only the best for me. But just like in the real world, it's the 1%ers that kind of put the turd in the punch bowl for the rest of us. And as I come out of this almost 5-year experience that has completely transformed me in so many ways, it has transformed the way I act and interact with nature. I have been given gifts by the unseen and eternal, and the earth herself, not with words that I am, desperately trying to pen down in a way, write down in a way, so that I can teach them. And just like my father before me, I won't teach something unless I can duplicate it, multiple times over and over again. 100% success ratio. And some of these gifts, I'm calling them, parting gifts for 5 years of suffering, 5 years of just listening to the wrong voices in the wilderness and being led astray, my own heap of mistakes, being thrust into the world of entrepreneurship and being a creator of content that I know for a fact can and will change the world. It could have been made a whole lot easier on me if it weren't for but a few bad eggs that saw an opportunity in my father's passing as a way to make a power grab. And, it breaks my heart to think that as someone, as I'll talk about here in a minute, who is literally responsible for the worldwide community and the fact that there is one, because it guided my father's choice that I'm about to talk about, that he made 47 years ago tonight on the full moon of purification. And the only thing I can do is what I was always taught to do, and that is just to forgive. Because even though these last 5 years haven't been the most pleasant, they have been the most jaw-dropping learning experiences and lessons in all of my, compared to the whole rest of my life. And I can't wait to start to weave them into my actual teaching. So with that being said, I want to talk a little bit about why am I doing my Sunday night podcast on Saturday, June 3rd. Well, simple. Tonight is a often forgotten about but very important date in the history of my father's work. If you remember back to, I'm not sure what lecture it is in the standard class, and he talks about how after all his wandering, he finally comes back to New Jersey and he starts, teaching Boy Scouts and the state police, and that's how he initially met John Young. But the plan was, when I was old enough to carry my own weight, so figure 5 or 6 years old, the plan was that my mother, my older brother PJ, myself, and my father were going to set off into the either the Bob Marshall Wilderness or the Canadian Rockies and disappear from society because of all of just the my father couldn't cope with all of the destruction he saw on a daily basis that we have wrought upon the face of Earth Mother. And then he remembered one of the final conversations he had with Stalking Wolf. And Stalking Wolf said to my father, "Grandson, someday you will have a son. whom you will name after yourself. And he goes on to say, on the first moon of purification, after your son is born, I want you to take him back to the good medicine place. And the good medicine place is not the primitive camp. They had several camps around. It's a different spot. But he asked my father that, after I was born, the full moon in January, to take your newborn son back to that place and lift your pipe in thanksgiving. So, I'm sitting here as I'm working on these things today, and I'm thinking back 47 years to what my father was doing at that moment in space and time. I know he was, by looking at some of the early photos of him holding me, it looks like he's holding the most fragile crystal thing combined with a nuclear bomb that might go off at any moment. So I can just imagine him bundling me up for a nice chilly January evening in the Pine Barrens. And he just propped me right up in the seat of his Land Cruiser, because car seats just weren't a thing back then. And he made that drive back to the good medicine place. And, for those who are familiar with the Pines, the good medicine place is a little bit closer to Lacey Road than it is 532, which is the road the primitive camp is on. And from what I heard, stories from my father from childhood, it was like a slice of the Pine Barrens combined with a little bit of that northeastern hardwood ecosystem. If you've ever driven the Garden State Parkway, it's really crazy. You're driving along and it's all like oak trees, hickories, hardwood trees, and then right at mile marker 98, it's like you could draw a line right down the middle. It's pitch pine trees and sand. And, for those of you who don't know this, the Pine Barrens are one of the, if not the most unique ecosystem on the planet. There are only 4 other places where they exist, I believe. I know there's some on Long Island, I think North Carolina, and maybe somebody in chat can come up with the other one. So it's a really unique environment, and if you've never been there, it is literally sugar white sand with pine trees, pitch pine trees being the primary tree. You got some scrub oak in there, got a lot of blueberries, a few other types of berries, and then you have the beloved cedar swamps, which are where Yoda would live had he lived in the Pine. Well, he did live in the Pine Barrens. So the good medicine area had a little finger of those kind of eastern hardwoods that dip down in through it, and it made it a bit more biodiverse. So it was a special place. So it starts to get dark. My mom is of course concerned that my father's taking me in his 1972 Land Cruiser with no seatbelt, just kind of stuffing me on the bench seat and propping some book underneath me so I don't go rolling off back into the Pine Barrens late at night. And I remember him saying, looking over at me and thinking how proud he was and how he knew, according to grandfather, that I would follow in his footsteps. And then something happened. He took the turn to what was the good medicine area, good medicine place. And what was once a beautiful cedar swamp and a little opening for camp, and a stream that was so clean you could drink out of, and just all this beauty, had become a putrefying, illegal garbage dump. And my father says, and when he talks about this during the standard class, he literally had to lay me down on a pile of trash and then go search around for the center of camp, where the fire pit was, and lit a fire and lifted his pipe the whole time in tears, thinking that how could somebody come back to such a beautiful place like this and just leave their junk everywhere. I often question that a lot too. When I lived in Oregon, I lived up near, my backyard was essentially, 1.2 million acres of national forest. And I was always up in the mountains in my truck or my Subaru, and I would always carry a box of contractor bags and gloves with me, because people would go out camping and they would just either burn all of their stuff, tents included, trash included, or they would just leave it. And it used to really piss me off. And then I realized that, I forgave them too, because that's the only way they were taught to enjoy nature. That nature is our, the great filter, and it'll just take care of it all. I somewhere in this book I have exactly how many 50 or 30 something gallon contractor bags I filled with trash in my time in Oregon, but it was a lot. And pretty much anywhere you go where people frequent, you see just callous misuse of the earth. Another thing that really just baffled my mind and boggled my mind about Oregon was people be at a park walking their dogs, right? Their dog would stop and poop. They would pick up the poop with a bag, tie it off, and then just throw it in the bushes, or just throw it in the middle of the trail. And I used to come upon these bags of crap and think of collective, creative ways to fling them back at said person. But I just could never understand why, if you're going to take the effort to bag up the poo, go one step further and take it to one of the many trash cans that inhabit any park that you go to. People who claim to be outdoors people and care about nature. I remember it was one of my first mornings fly fishing for winter steelhead on the Sandy River. And I was so excited because as a lifelong fly fisherman, I had always dreamed about living in salmon and steelhead country. And those dreams were kind of rapidly dashed when I came to the realization that at one point the Columbia River Basin held the largest steelhead runs and some of the largest salmon runs in the entire world. Estimates as far as how many fish would return every year were in the tens of millions. And then, lo and behold, I moved there in 2017, and I open up the paper you get every week that has the dam fish counts, because the big hydroelectric dams have little windows so they can count how many fish go through. And they tell the native fish, the ones that have bred naturally, from the hatchery ones, because the hatchery ones, they snip off the fin just behind the dorsal fin. So, one day when I go to fish and I read that I was planning on fishing the Willamette that day, or the Clackamas, sorry. And I saw that in the last 48 hours, 2 wild steelhead had made it back that day. Some years the fish counts would be 300-400. Sometimes they'd be a few thousand. But nothing of what I was led to believe you're in the world of salmon where the rivers are so full of fish that you can walk across their backs and your feet won't ever get wet. And it's just to think how quickly we've decimated something that was once just, the volume of biomass that would go in and out of the Columbia River every year was enormous. And when you're in Portland, if you see a building that's made in 1903, it's considered historic. I grew up in a farmhouse that was built in 1778. But the colonization of Oregon and Washington and all that, in just 100+ years, we've taken this huge fishery and decimated it to where now, on average, they say 0.05%, and I may have that figure slightly wrong, but 0.05% of wild salmon and steelhead and even hatchery fish make it back to their natal rivers every year. And part of the reason is, of course, commercial fishing. We like our fish. Part of the reason is all of the hydroelectric dams and the sea lions that just post up in front of the fish ladders and eat salmon to their heart's content. Not to mention the fact that they have to make it up these fish ladders, and I think the furthest recorded, steelhead went from hundreds of miles to its spawning reds. And then the cool thing about steelhead and why they are, separate from salmon in my mind, is most salmon return after they're full-grown adults, and they die after they spawn. Steelhead, however, don't do that. They fight it out, they lay their eggs, they turn around, and they go back out all the way to the Sea of Japan and make a big loop. The first time they go out, they spend about 5 years out there, and some of the bigger fish 6-7 times. Think about all of the predators that this fish had to evade to become this chrome, beautiful, just when you hold one, it's like solid muscle. And that's why it's such a desirable fish to go fishing for. And I put my days in when I lived there, and I think in 5 years I fish actively. I caught 4 hatchery raised coho salmon, and I caught 2 steelhead, one that was wild and one that was hatchery raised. And that's something like probably 60 to 80 days on the river itself. So, I still am forever the optimist, because if you look at the way the West Coast is doing things now, they are starting to remove a lot of the dams. Most recently, in the Klamath River in California-Oregon border, within a couple years of removing the dam, fish are just naturally coming back to it. And I believe the same thing happened when they undammed a river in New Hampshire. The Atlantic salmon started to come back. Fun fact, if you ever attended a class at the old Tracker Farm, the river behind the farm, the Musconetcong as it's called, is a tributary of the Delaware River, and was most definitely at one point, pre-Whitey, full of giant Atlantic salmon. And Atlantic salmon can get up 30, 40, 50 pounds. And one of my favorite things to do as a child was to rebuild the fish weirs that the Lenape and a few other tribes would build in the Muskie to capture salmon every year. So flashing back to 47 years ago, probably right about now, my father came to a realization. Came to the realization that running away with me and my mom and maybe my brother and just kind of homesteading, living off the land, when you possess this wealth of knowledge, you are doing no better than those that seek to pollute and destroy. So it was that night, probably, let's see, it's 8 o'clock here, so it's 9 o'clock there. Probably not too long from now, my father made perhaps one of the most important choices that a single human could make that could have such a profound effect on so many people. And that night, he made the choice to give up his dream, which was, to go away with me and my mom and brother and start living his vision as grandfather had laid out before him. And, people often, when I talk about my work, and they obviously can tell I'm passionate about it, and they often reference like, oh, you've got your dream job. I'm like, yeah, 5 years of poverty, and yeah, that's some dream job. This is not my dream job. If I could, if I could have a dream job, let's see, it would be to be a Nikon ambassador and work with National Geographic or something like that, using my camera lens to show people beautiful things all over the world, or a fly fishing guide in Belize, or something. It's a nice dream to have, but like my father before me, and even though I tried to fight it for a few years and paid the price for that, the first time I stepped up on that stage alongside my father and my co-instructors, I made a commitment to give up on living any sort of dream job I had and living the vision, which leads to me leaving the tracker school at his behest, because he saw that I was becoming, I don't want to use corrupted, it's not a very good word. I was being influenced by the feeling of 100 people plus coming every month and hanging on every word you say. It's just like anything, it's an addictive feeling. And I even used to warn standard class volunteers when I would lead my volunteer meetings. I would say, listen, gang, just because you are here as a volunteer, to the folks who are here taking this class, you are special. And not only are they going to be watching everything I do, but they're going to be watching everything you do as well. So keep that in mind, with your behavior and how you act and interact, and never do anything without thinking somebody might be watching. I've got a funny, very too adult story to tell about that one some other day. But yeah, when I ask myself if I could go back and do it all over again, would I still choose this path? Abso-freaking-lutely. without question, without a doubt, because there is nothing I would rather be doing with my time in my life than watching somebody blow their first Tinder bundle into flames, or teaching people that those things they've been getting rid of out of their yard because they think they're weeds are vegetables and leafy greens that are far more nutritious than the stuff they're buying at the store. And as I was going together and looking through old notes for tonight, I just came upon some testimonials from students, and it made me realize why everything that I've been through, and I'm sure I will be tested again and again and again by the universe as I grow older, but I'll be that much more prepared next time. It's the experiences I've had, literally having to learn how to live, as a person, as an individual, which is something I had never done at any point throughout my life. I had always lived with a partner or friends, or when I was younger at home, and it led to some pretty rough times. And then to make things worse, right at the almost what I think is the worst part of it, my father takes his final walk. And previous to that, and a couple years before, my stepmother took her final walk, and then a couple years before that, my own mother. And speaking of my mother, I want to say thank you so much, Mom, because many people don't know this, but there would never, ever, ever have been a school or a book if it were not for my mother believing in my father, believing in his words and his work, and gently cajoling him into putting pen to paper, writing some of these experiences down. So, my mother for 15 years, worked ceaselessly alongside my father. My father was in charge of everything to do with the students and the classes, and my mother and a few others were in charge of all the back end work. And when my parents divorced when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, just like is being done to me now, it's like poof, all of a sudden, this woman that was a pillar of that place, very few people still remember her, and that breaks my heart. One thing I've learned over these last few years is a whole bunch of observed behavior from people that I once loved, respected, and would have given my life for in a second if the need arose. We're doing things to me behind the scenes to keep me silenced. I find it funny that, I see all these events online about my dad and this and that and the other thing. And not only do I never get invited to any of these things, you'd think I would have a few things, a few gems I might offer, being that I've been doing this for a long time. But just the fact that, I've said this before, I feel like somebody has an opacity slider somewhere else, and they're just slowly trying to, fade me out of existence. But by doing so, you've only made me stronger. you've only made my connection to the earth that much deeper. And you sure as hell have taught me how to finally hone my bullshit meter. Right now, I'm currently in a small town in Wisconsin. Outside, it is a wonderful 11 degrees. And I'm on the property of a student who came to the tracker school. We're the same age, and I accidentally called him one night when I was in Montana, meaning to call another friend with almost the same exact name, but just slightly different spelling. And I kind of told him my story, and he said, "Come to Wisconsin, and we'll get things set straight." And I was a bit apprehensive because, I had moved on my birthday before, which led to the worst year of my life. My last year, from November 3rd to November 3rd, according to my journal, I was only eating 4 out of every 7 days of the week to keep my business going, to keep my website operational, to pay for all these stupid little bills that I used to just be able to pay for a full year and forget about it. I have had so many, I want to call them nervous breakdowns, but just complete and utter breakdowns because my body just gives out on me because I push too hard. My watch is screaming at me that, on average I spend 5% of my day in AFib. And that's due to me needing a pacemaker from Lyme disease. And I was told 5 years ago, before I lost my health insurance at my last job, that I was going to need a pacemaker in 5 to 10 years. And that was almost 6 years ago. I used to go to the dentist 4 times a year because periodontal disease runs in my family. And I haven't been to the dentist in years. And I have like a broken chipped tooth in the back of my mouth that's starting to hurt. And I'm so ashamed that I can't just call up and make a dentist appointment. Even though things are slowly getting better. I got a notice from my bank today that they're, put my car loan into delinquency. Even though I haven't missed a payment in 8 months. So I'm not quite sure how that is. So I'll deal with that on Monday. But, the bottom line is, I don't do this job for the money or for fame or for influence over other people. I simply and purely do this job because of the miracles I've seen it cause. Just about every skill I teach, I have seen have a miraculous effect on somebody. Especially the movement skills, which is why I'm going to be leaning into those a lot, along with the other crucial awareness skills that allow people to go into nature and truly experience it, not just breeze through it and not notice anything, but teach them how to truly connect to that landscape with every fall of their foot, with everywhere they look, everywhere they don't look. I'm going to teach people how to accelerate working out their physical senses through a series of exercises, which will then wake up your instincts. Another gift that was given to me involves something known as the baseline. So, to those of you, when I say the word baseline, you probably think of the overall level of an animal and activity based on the time of day, the season, whatever. But typically in most places, the baseline is, right before dawn, it's pretty quiet. And then just as that blue light comes up a little bit, you'll get that bird chorus in the morning. And then there'll be this spike right around 10 o'clock. And then in the middle of the day, there'll be this lull. And then right before sunset, hour or two, that's when you get that next big rush of animal activity. And this is especially true in the summer, because any smart animal knows if you're out in the hottest part of the day moving around doing things, you are burning precious resources. You're burning precious energy. And I used to go at a place and be able to step to the edge of the woods, and anytime I go into a new patch of woods, I always ask permission first. And before I take a step in, I use my eyes, my ears, my nose to take a reading on that baseline. And in my head, it used to kind of appear to me as this one-dimensional graph. But now, with these new tools that I have, instead of that one-dimensional graph, I can now take that and turn it like a three-dimensional EQ and separate it out by different layers and levels, and learn how to read all those different signs, on top of each other, and how they're acting and interacting with each other. My first lesson into this was due to one of my new favorite birds, the Steller's jay, which is related to blue jays and Canada jays. Just in my time in Oregon hanging out with Steller's jays, I learned that they have an alarm call for humans. They have a different alarm call for coyotes. They have a different alarm call for bobcats. They have a different one for mountain lions. In fact, with mountain lions, they go silent. So if you live in mountain lion country and there's all of a sudden a bunch of bird noise and you're moving pretty slowly and steadily and not breaking that baseline and everything gets quiet, you might want to keep your head on a swivel, because there could be a mountain lion nearby. And that's, I think the thing that I am most thankful for as far as gifts and lessons my father gave me was that I'm never bored. I can, through things like the sacred question, I can use that ceaselessly, whether it's about something in nature or about something in my own life. And much of my learning, when it came to being a business human, is by simply sacred questioning the hell out of something, before I come up with an answer. You don't want to just jump into anything with a surface level observation. And before I wrap this up and show this one final thing I wanted to show y'all, I want to say thank you to those of you who in the last month or so have personally reached out to me and apologized to me for not calling me and checking on me and seeing how I was doing, after my father passed or after my mother passed, or if I needed any advice or anything like that. There were so many people who saw a rumor online, that was started by people I hired or worked with, for years. Instead of not being satisfied with that surface level observation, and calling somebody they call call friend, they're just satisfied with reading something online, and then worse yet, not even defending it, or worse yet still, passing it on. To the point now where my social media has been flagged by some group of mysterious people. Pretty much everything I post gets flagged for some sort of villainy, according to Facebook. When those of you who follow my posts know, I pretty much post pictures of wildlife, what I happen to be doing, when my next live stream's going to be, and things like that. Nothing that really could be considered violating community standards. And it's just, one thing I love about my friend Zach, whose property I'm on. Here's a person who's been incredibly successful in life. And he just keeps things simple. He runs his business with a paper notebook in his back pocket and email. And if you were to turn one of my cameras filming me, I have 2 monitors right here that are showing me, what I'm seeing and what you're seeing and all that stuff. And I just think of, even though I've slimmed my life down and simplified it, and now that my community here recognizing that me having to sell my camera that my father got me for my birthday in 2024, because photography was the one thing that was special that my father and I shared. I was forced to sell that last February to keep my car from getting repossessed and losing access to my website. And the only reason I was forced to sell it was because I was led astray far away to a place where I had to spend a lot of money to get there, and I only spent about 6 weeks there, and then was separated from 2/3 of my belongings for 2 months. So I couldn't adequately open my business again. And then when I get here, and I feel like, wow, I can finally breathe again. I know there's people just over there, a short walk that I can go hang out with and have dinner with, and conversations, and these things that were so foreign to me after 5 years of pretty much talking with store clerks and customer service people. It's so nice to be appreciated for who you are as an individual and the things you know how to do. This place, it was almost like the most perfect place I could end up to finish out this 5-year test. It's a place where it has all the things I love. It's got lots of wildlife, lots of heavy equipment, and I can fill many roles here, from running a skid steer to hanging out with my friend Fern, who's 2.5 months old, or my friend Sawyer, who's 3 years old. I've picked up a myriad of skill sets throughout my life, and to whoever opens their home to me, I open my skill sets to them. And one thing that living here has made me realize is the community aspect. How even though there's more people than ever, that sense of community that got us through the most harsh times this planet has ever seen is slowly withering away to nothing. And that makes me sad, which makes me want to teach more. So, a couple things I want to talk about real quick before I wrap this up. Let me see if I can find it in here. Where is it? No, is that one? So, hold on. Where is it? Dang it. There we go. So, Over the weekend of, I think it's the first weekend in April, my friend Scott Martin and I are going to be running a class in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Just a quick warning, that QR code is not quite active yet, as I'm in the process of building out the class page for that, so people can register for it. But yeah, it's going to be a great class where we'll be, on the edge of the Black Hills in a beautiful time of year in a beautiful spot. And one thing with my classes, it's going to be Scott and I teaching, so we're going to limit that number to probably about 15 people. And so when I finish designing the class page for my website, I will put up, there'll be more stuff about the description and what we're going to teach and all that stuff as well. But an even bigger one, and one that kind of flabbergasted me when this person contacted me, is I got contacted by this gentleman right here, Mr. Christopher Neerdens, who started the School of Self-Reliance. And I didn't realize this until talking with him, but he actually started his school in 1974. So 4 years before Tracker School was born, he was teaching. And, I've always been an admirer of Christopher's work. He's written countless books. And so anyway, one day I was down in Montana, and I get handed a phone from my friend Austin, and it's Chris on the phone, and he invites me to start off with a 4-part online class, which will be beginning soon. And then also, once the weather gets nicer, doing some co-teaching together in California. And I'm really looking forward to that, because there haven't always been 1,000,001 outdoor schools in this country. That came with the boom of these stupid shows. Back in 2005 even, there was probably 10, 12 schools at the most. Now there are hundreds. I talked to my friend in Britain the other day. He asked me how many bushcraft schools I thought there were on the island of Britannia. And I was like, I don't know, 50, because it's not a very big place. He said there's over 400 bushcraft schools. And just like with any other art form, whether, it's often used in the tattoo industry, any good tattoo artist will tell you that for every one good tattoo artist out there, there are 10 bad ones. And unfortunately, it's becoming that way with outdoor schools and the popularity of these shows. You get people who enjoy the outdoors, obviously, but they think that, watching a few seasons of Alone and then sleeping out, on a blanket around a fire for a couple weekends and taking an $89 online wilderness survival instructor training program is all you need to open a school. And my father would be the first one to tell you, he wanted all of us, to pass on what we learned or what you learned at your standard class. But what he didn't want you to do was claim to be an expert. Be honest with people. Say, hey, I just learned how to make fire by rubbing 2 sticks together, and I still really suck at it, but do you want to work on it together? Oh, forgot to switch the camera back. 1 second. And yeah, it's unfortunate, because I spoke with a few individuals in Oregon who, just because they had money, I would look at their Instagram page, and every weekend they'd have 20 or 30 people, and I could barely get any. And I asked one of the guys just straight up, I'm like, how do you, if you don't mind me asking, where are you finding your students? And he, to paraphrase, he's, oh, that? I just have the office girl throw about 25 or 30 grand a quarter at marketing on social media. And I'm like, 25 to 30 grand a quarter on marketing? Holy crap, that's almost more than I've ever made at my highest paying job ever. So I can't afford to do that. I can't afford to pay those types of prices. So I literally rely on grassroots and people spreading the word about me. And just the other night, my friend Austin sent me a document that he generated by querying a few different AIs. And the information provided in that was pretty mind-blowing. And it was, I may share it publicly, I may not. But, at least according to that document, I should be doing way better than I actually am. But things are getting better. I have rounded that bend. I never thought I would live in Wisconsin, but here I am, and I can't wait for the weather to warm up so we can go exploring. I'm going to be hosting a series of classes throughout the Midwest. I'm still going to do the nomad thing. I physically need to get my health back. I financially need to get back on my feet a little bit more so that I'm not just, one of the things that just crushed me was just as I was getting ready to run, hit go. I chose not to turn my Starlink on this month. I chose to pause it for a month and work out of the office just over there where there's internet. But it would have required quite a bit of moving of gear back and forth. So it was supposed to end, my service was supposed to end tonight at midnight. So in order to run this, I spent $165 to turn on my Starlink for another month, just so I could do this live stream and the ones I have coming up. And I love Starlink. It's worth its weight in gold. But I wasn't planning on spending that this month. So now I've got to come up with someplace else to come up with $165 to fill that hole. And honestly, as somebody who took great pains to learn how to manage money and be smart with it, only to be parted with it based on a bad choice on my part, I now literally write down everything I spend, on what I spend it on, and some of the stuff is ridiculous. Like the fact that I've spent over $400 on ice since I left Portland on July 15th. However, now ice isn't such a thing. Ice is not an issue now, so I got plenty of that out there. But yeah, stay tuned for, I'm going to be announcing a lot of other collaborations and things soon. Christopher's going to be making, he's going to do an interview with me that he's going to get in a magazine where I get to tell my side of the story in all of this madness that has ensued over the last year. Because the other last week I attended an event, the prayer for the Pine Barrens, and I may have missed it, but the only person I saw that even acknowledged I was there, was my friend Clementine. And I'm watching the people who are speaking, and I'm like, oh, if people only knew the reason why that person is part of the circle, or that person, they might think a little bit differently. But once again, I won't expose any information to make anybody look bad. You know, in the hundreds of meetings that went on over the last year and a half about my father's legacy, I have not been invited or asked my opinion at a single one by a single person or group of people. It's like I don't exist. It's like I haven't been practicing these skills for 47 years and teaching them for over a quarter a century. It's like I'm a ghost. And trust me when I tell you that the T3 that you knew back in the day is not the T3 that exists now. This one is much more savvy and smart and ready to truly rebuild on this firm foundation that my friend Zach and his family have opened to me. Got me a new camera body, which is something I'm so thankful for, because I can now continue to show the world the way I see it through my eyes. And it just, I'm filled with gratitude, even with the obstacles I still face. I know that with the right people around, I will truly fly. That being said, I wanted to share one last thing with you. And one thing that really saddens me is, being that I'm a photographer and a filmmaker, I have very little to no footage or audio of my father, talking or teaching. Many years ago, I started Tracker Audio as a way to, make a little bit of extra revenue and provide students with a superior audio recording. So I just so happened to find in my Google Drive portion of a standard class, and it was right before the Tracker 30th anniversary party, because he references it in there. And I want to close tonight's. I'm going to let my father close tonight. So, thank you all for your continued love and support and messages. And just know that, if you think you can help me in some way, whether it's internet marketing or learning this, that, or the other thing, how I can do things more efficiently, because as an individual who does the job of 4 people, I've had to streamline things to the point where, it's not quite a well-oiled machine, but it's much better than it was. But there's still always room for more learning. So, Dad, I'm going to leave the rest of tonight's episode to you. And thank you all.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
Next Saturday,
welcome
or Sunday,
to the
we'll
Tracker
go back
School.
To 5 p.m.
I used to love it. For about 25, 26 years, we used to hold this class in an old, rundown, 200-year-old cow barn. And we'd get a call to the office every once in a while, and a student would say, "We'd like to come to take a look at your facility." And I used to get a chuckle out of that. And people come here and they say, where is the Tracker School? Well, it's simple. I'm the Tracker School. I put my butt on the airplane, the school will move. To Nicaragua, I gotta embrace it. Like grandfather, I gotta fall to my knees and bring the earth deep to my chest and breathe her fragrance. I can't look at a swamp and say, oh, that's a nice swamp. I've got to get in it. I've got to feel her essence. I've got to feel her breathing. I've got to feel the warm surface and the cold depths of that mud. I've got to tickle the belly of herons and come face to face with frogs. No, I can't watch a storm. I've got to be knocked on my ass by those waves. I got to feel the fury of the wind, the sting of the rain in my face. I want to be alive. I want to live. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tracker School. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Tracker School.